finish up here with some edge trailing strokes. Make sure the bevel is all nice and even before moving on to the finishing stones. Because any sort of shaping of the bevel that needs to be done needs to be finished right here. Any stone from here on out is pretty much going to be refinement of what you've established on the knife. So for the stones I'm using, this 1000 grit is pretty much it. It's going to be the final stone that's going to do any sort of cutting in the bevel and establishing your geometry and getting the edge sharp. Everything is looking pretty good. Feels pretty sharp right now. Usually I'd move on to the 6000 grit Arishiyama stone, but because of the steel, a little bit harder, it's a particle metallurgy steel, I'm going to move on to the Naniwa 2K Aoto stone, just to bridge the gap between the 1K and the 6K a little bit. That way I'm not stuck with any residual scratch pattern that gives me difficulties in the final sharpening. I'm not going to use a mud with this stone. It really doesn't help at all. Maybe a little bit when you're doing a large single bevel, but as is, this type of knife, it's just going to collect some metal swarf on the surface and polish a little bit as it does so. It's not a muddy stone in any sort of way. You do have to build a mud on the surface if you want to work with a mud, but I think I like it. They call the stone the green brick of joy because it's got a real good feel to it. Very pleasurable to use, and it also handles just about any steel I've put to it, including S30V and even this XHP steel. Already the scratch pattern from the 1000 grit stone's gone. This stone, although rated at 2K, is probably around 4000 grit when it's working on the bevel. So we're pretty much there with it. I'm going to go a little longer just to refine out some of the burr that's on the edge. When it comes to burr removal, I kind of believe that you can do it all on the stone, pretty much, as long as the steel's got a good heat treat to it. So once the scratch pattern is brought down on the edge to whatever the grit of the stone is, as long as you keep your pressure light, you should be able to take off whatever burr's there. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's just work at it a little bit, remove the burr. That way we can make sure that the scratch pattern is equal all the way to the apex of the edge, because if it's not, then you just have a nice scratch pattern on your bevel, and where sharpness counts at the point, it's not there. So by making sure you've done the best job you can at each stone, you can assure by the end that you have the best edge possible. Okay, so that's good for that stone. Like I said, this stone works really fast, so it didn't take long to change the scratch pattern to what we needed it to. And now, move on to the 6000 grit Arishiyama stone. I'm going to take and clean up the surface a little bit and build a little slurry up to get the proper effect on the bevel that I'm looking for. When you add water to a slurry, you gotta be careful. You don't want to add much. I just add about a drop or two right there from my fingertips. You add too much and you'll destroy the slurry and you'll have to rebuild it, because it'll get too thin and won't do what it should be doing to reduce the scratch pattern. Now I mentioned the effect I'm trying to get, and what I mean by that is with the use of the slurry like this, the bevel's not going to be a high polish like most would expect from a high grit stone. It's gonna be well polished per se, but it's going to be very dull in appearance. It's not going to have the bright mirror effect that you would see on most stones at a high grit like this. right now I'm doing like I did on the other stones, switching to a strafing method here to finish off the edge, remove any burr by lightening up the pressure as I go, and using the pressure point method that I use for sharpening. I'm able to hold a very consistent bevel when I'm going in this stroke, because the bevel is well established and it kind of locks into the stone when you hold it like that. So with every pass, once you get the feeling built up, you can get to a point where you can feel that burr being pulled off of the edge. And that was pretty much it right there. Feel the things. Feels really good. Got a nice bite to it. We got maybe. Yeah, we got a little bit of burr on the back side there. So we're just gonna take one stroke here down the stone like that. I'm gonna wipe the slurry off. Check it by stroking back on the finger like this. And that feels pretty good. Paper test here, see what kind of sharpness we got out of it. Straight push cut through some newsprint. Kind of wrinkled up on the edge there. Try and get a better edge to work with. As you can see, it cuts newsprint in both directions. Just make effortless slices through the paper. Alright, that's good for the stones. Now we're going to move on to the strafing.